In this video we are going to take a closer look at the Fortis Kill Team of the Deathwatch and how it plays in 10th edition. In the first part, we will go through all the relevant rules and datasheets available to this kill team. In the second part, we will then look at how to potentially use it in 10th edition. Lastly, there will be some modeling recommendations and a quick wrap-up of what has been covered. This is the second release of a 4-part series, with each part covering one of the different kill teams available to the Deathwatch.
Welcome to SwissHammer, your channel for modeling in Warhammer 40k. My name is Tammer, and I will be guiding you through this video.
The kill teams are the unique army rule of the Deathwatch, allowing us to combine a selection of different datasheets into a single unit. Contrary to 9th edition, where kill teams counted as the base troops of a Deathwatch army, they are not battle line in 10th edition, meaning that they fall under the rule of 3, aka we can pick up to 3 of the same kill team in an army list. For every kill team, the initial 5 models are always set in stone, and we can think of these as paying a tax for being able to then add more powerful datasheets. For the Fortis Kill Team specifically, the initial 5 models are Intercessors, and we are then able to add 0 to 4 Hellblaster, 0 to 4 Assault Intercessor, or 0 to 2 Outrider models. What is important here, especially for new players or players new to the Deathwatch, is that kill teams now have their own datasheet, meaning that no keywords, abilities or anything like that carries over from the original datasheets of the models involved. This is further represented by GW referring to all the infantry models as Intercessors, with different wargear in case of the Fortis Kill Team, which can be very confusing for anyone not familiar with these specific models. You can think about it this way. GW now fully separated rules and models. If you are looking to get the actual plastic models, you would need to go by their original names, but for the purposes of the Fortis Kill Team and its rules, the only differentiation is between Intercessors with different wargear and the Outrider bikes. Confusing enough? Well, let's go through the Fortis Kill Team datasheet itself then. Starting with the keywords, the major change here is for the Outriders, which get the infantry keyword rather than mounted, and will always keep it regardless of the amount of models left in the kill team. Speaking of Outriders, as the limit for these is now only 2, for this kill team at full starting strength will always be toughness 4 and remain so until it is down to 4 models, out of which 2 would have to be the Outriders, at which point the kill team becomes toughness 5. This is quite a downgrade from 9th edition, where we could get up to 5 Outriders in a Fortis Kill Team, and as such had an easier time making some good use of the T5 from the Outriders. For abilities, the Fortis Kill Team gets access to Fortis Doctrines, which is the weakest out of all the kill team abilities, as it gives a very situational add 1 to the hit roll against targets below half strength. This is especially underwhelming when considering that the models in this kill team lose all their original datasheet abilities, aka sticky objectives for the Intercessors, shock assault for the Assault Intercessors, a chance to fire again upon death for the Hellblasters, which is huge, and turbo boost for the Outriders. As I was already mentioning in my first guide to the Spectre's kill team, GW really has to make sure that the loss of the sum of these original abilities is compensated by the kill team ability, and that's just nowhere near the case for the Fortis Kill Team. Looking at the wargear options, here GW went a bit creative as well. While we won't have the additional wargear flexibility of the Intercessor Sergeant, like Power Fist or Thunder Hammer, one Intercessor can replace his close combat weapon for a long Witchel melee weapon, and another Intercessor can replace his bolt rifle for a long Witchel melee weapon. Furthermore, 2 Intercessors can replace their bolt rifles for long Witchel ranged weapons. This brings us up to a grand total of 2 long Witchel melee weapons, 2 long Witchel ranged weapons and 3 bolt rifles. While still subpar when compared to the loadouts of Deathwatch veterans, this at least gives the underwhelming Intercessor tax a bit of an extra punch. Furthermore, as on their original datasheets, all Hellblasters can replace their bolt pistol with a plasma pistol instead. Last but not least, we can also attach leaders to the Fortis Kill Team, and the way this works is that any character that can be attached to an Intercessor squad can also be attached to this unit instead. This includes the Primaris Captain, Primaris Lieutenant, Primaris Chaplain, Primaris Librarian, Primaris Tech Marine for whatever reason, Primaris Company Champion, Primaris Apothecary, Primaris Ancient and the Justiciar. That's quite the list. With the basic rules out of the way, how can we best make use of the Fortis Kill Team in 10th edition? Well, as I briefly mentioned during the rules coverage, I think this kill team needs some serious help in terms of rules and unit composition. When compared to 9th edition, it pretty much lost its 2 main selling points. The first was Infantry Outriders, where we would combat squad 4 of them with the Intercessor Sergeant, and the second strategy was to have the Intercessors provide ablative wounds for Hellblasters. The first does not work anymore on multiple levels, and the second is much more efficiently done with an Impulsor instead. With current points considerations in mind, the 2 viable compositions would be as following. The 5 mandatory Intercessors, using 2 long Witchel melee and 2 long Witchel ranged weapons, 3 Hellblasters and 2 Outriders, or 4 Hellblasters and 1 Outrider respectively. We are then ending up with a somewhat cheap hybrid kill team that has a bit of shooting and close combat, but does not really excel at either, and the kill team ability is far worse than what the different models involved would get individually. As far as attaching characters goes, I think there are several viable options here. For instance, the Librarian granting a 4+ invul save, the Apothecary being able to bring a model back a turn, including the Outriders, or a Captain for the free usage of a strat as well as adding some much needed melee punch for this kill team. Having said that, as far as I'm concerned, I would prefer to invest these points for characters into another kill team or a similar unit with more overall punching power instead. All in all, I personally consider the Fortis Kill Team the worst out of the 4 for the time being, and I think as far as the individual models are concerned, either load some Hellblasters into an Impulsor party bus, or try Outriders with a Chaplain on bike, or even the ATV attached. Either of these should bring more overall value. But in order to end this video on a positive note, what do I think would be required to make it worthwhile? Well, there are multiple elements to tackle here. Pretty much as it already was in 9th edition, the Intercessors as the base tax makes it awkward to dedicate a unit to either melee or ranged. Now that GW has streamlined the names already and added the long Witchel weapon options, just give the option for all Intercessors to either change to bolt pistol and long Witchel melee weapon or long Witchel ranged weapons. This would add some much needed extra punch to the otherwise underwhelming Intercessors of 10th edition. Just like the Hellblasters, Outriders absolutely have to get back to a max of 4 models, at which point we could build a pretty interesting kill team with 6 long Witchel weapon Intercessors and 4 Outriders. For as long as Hellblasters firing out of an Impulsor remains a thing, I just don't think a Fortis Kill Team can compete in that regard. Either way, the Fortis Kill Team would then also need an ability that is less situational, maybe just copying the one from Intercessor or Assault Intercessors would work well enough. Anyway, GW, I hope you have been taking notes. Then last but not least, let's have a look at some modeling recommendations. Ironically enough, I think this is the moment where we will definitely want to magnetize the Intercessors. Now, as veteran viewers of my channel well know, I have been suggesting this all the way through 9th edition already, as it allows to freely swap between Intercessor and Assault Intercessor loadouts, resulting in Intercessors with far more dynamic poses. Given the new option for long vigil weapons, as well as Deathwatch veterans being back in business, I think a magnetized Intercessor body can now be used for a variety of purposes. That aside, I think what's pretty convenient for both Intercessors and Hellblasters is that now there is only one type of gun rules-wise, meaning that we can build those guns with whatever magazines we want to. But I don't think that anyone really cared about this beforehand anyway. I would argue most non-Space Marine players cannot tell them apart. This at least settles the debate for good. Back in 9th edition, I released a video covering the replacement of the shoulder pads with the Deathwatch pauldron for the Outriders, or one of another chapter. For those interested, the link is in the description. To wrap things up, over the course of the video, we have looked at the Fortis Kill Team of the Deathwatch in 10th edition. Starting with the mandatory 5 Intercessors, we can then add 0 to 4 Hellblasters, 0 to 4 Assault Intercessor, or 0 to 2 Outrider models. One drastic change from 9th edition is that the Kill Teams now have their own datasheet, and the unit composition has all infantry labeled as an Intercessor with different war gear. While certainly confusing for new players, the point here is that none of these models retain abilities or keywords from their original datasheet, but get the ones from the Fortis Kill Team instead. The unfortunate news is that this kill team is currently seriously lacking, be it due to the underwhelming Fortis Doctrine's ability or the somewhat odd combination of models available to this kill team. As it currently stands, 5 Intercessors, 4 of which using long vigil weapons, combined with either 4 Hellblasters and 1 Outrider, or 3 Hellblasters and 2 Outriders, can be turned into a somewhat cost-effective hybrid kill team, but I would personally argue that this cannot compete with some of the other kill teams available to the Deathwatch. Furthermore, I think Hellblasters in an Impulsor, as well as Outriders with a Chaplain and or an ATV are the more competitive options to explore in terms of these models. I sincerely hope that GW will re-evaluate these rules and unit compositions at some point during 10th edition. Then lastly, I think the moment to magnetize Intercessors has finally come, as they can now be used to potentially cover a variety of datasheets in the Deathwatch. So that's it for the guide to the Fortis Kill Team of the Deathwatch in 10th edition. What do you guys think about this particular kill team, and are you planning to include it into your current lists? Did GW do a good job balancing the abilities for this particular kill team? Any important rules or tactics that I missed? Let me know in the comments. Then finally, if you made it this far and I still have your attention, if you like my content, any additional support is greatly appreciated, as it helps me invest into future videos. For that, I have both a Ko-fi as well as a Patreon page, links are in the description. Furthermore, I would also like to mention that there is a SwissHammer Facebook page where I will be posting links to my videos as well as articles I find of interest. I do read a lot about the hobby, but not all of it will always end up as its own video. I look forward to seeing you there as well. As always, thank you very much for watching, guys. Your continued support is greatly appreciated. I hope you have been enjoying this video, give me a thumbs up if you did, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thanks again and see you next time.